Good evening, one and all. Hope everyone is safe during this pandemic. Myself, Tejaswini, and first year BCom student of Seshadripuram Evening Degree College. A very warm welcome to the 34th International Webinar of Seshadripuram Evening Degree College in association with University of Saskatchewan, Canada on Digital Humanities Session 5. At the outset, I'm happy to inform you all that our evening college is celebrating its Golden Jubilee year. On behalf of our college, we congratulate all the stakeholders. Department of English, in association with University of Saskatchewan, Canada, is organizing international webinar on Digital Humanities Session 5.
I take this opportunity to welcome you all to this international webinar in association with University of Saskatchewan, Canada. At the request, I would like to thank all the office bearers of this esteemed institution and welcome all of them. Sir, on behalf of Seshadripuram Evening Degree College, I welcome you for this webinar. Now, I would like to introduce and welcome Dr. Barbara Bordalejo, who is rendering a theme address. Madam is a textual critic, editor, and digital humanist with a background in English literature. She has worked at 4 universities on 2 continents. She is the director of Canterbury Tales project, which has pioneered research methodologies in humanities, including the use of evolutionary biology software for the study of texts. She has edited Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, Darwin's Origin of Species, and collaborated in creation of editions of Dante's Commedia, Boccaccio's Cressida, and 15th century Castilian Consequences. She worked with Angus Ward, University of Birmingham, in an electronic edition and research environment of the Historia di Espana with the Peter Robinson, University of Saskatchewan, in the Textual Communities project, a tool for transcribing, collating, and publishing text. She is also currently involved in the Cant app, an edition of Canterbury Tales for mobile devices. Madam, on behalf of Seshadripuram Educational Trust, I welcome you for this webinar. Welcome, ma'am. Further, I would like to introduce and welcome another theme speaker, Dr. Spandana Bhowmik. She has a PhD in Digital Humanities from Jadavpur University, Calcutta. Her research work focuses on textual transmission of a cluster of plays by Rabindranath Tagore and creation of an interactive multimedia representation of the textual changes and other documentation surrounding it. She was a Charles Wallace Fellow in 2008 and visited the Center of Textual Scholarship, De Montfort University, UK. In 2014, she was a visiting fellow at Scholars Lab, University of Virginia and the British Library, UK. She was a part of School of Cultural Texts and Records, Jadavpur University, where she worked for 10 years in various British Library, EAP and DH projects. She was an essential member for the 3-person digital development team which created a Bengali collation software, University of Saskatchewan. Prabhed for Baichatra, the online Variarium project. She also taught modules on computation texting processes and the TEI in Digital Humanities and Cultural Informatics. The 1-year PG diploma course run by the school and Cultural Texts and Records. She is the Archivist at Indian Foundation for the Arts, Bangalore. She is responsible for the policies and strategies for the IFA Archive, the creation, maintenance of content management system for the visual processing of physical and digital material from the 650 plus projects that IFA has supported. Madam, on behalf of Seshadripuram Educational Trust, I wholeheartedly welcome you for this webinar. Welcome, ma'am. It is my proud privilege to introduce who is presiding this webinar, Sir W.D. Ashok Sir, Trustee, Seshadripuram Educational Trust. W.D. Ashok Sir holds a master's degree in pharmacy, specialized in the field of total parental nutrition. He served at the famous Al Adin Hospital, Kuwait, over 13 years. He is a trustee of Seshadripuram Educational Trust. Sir is the backbone for all these events conducted in our evening degree college. Sir, on behalf of Seshadripuram Evening Degree College, I welcome you, sir. Welcome, sir. I would like to welcome our beloved principal, sir, Professor N.S. Satish. Welcome, sir. I would all I would again welcome all the office bearers and trustees of Seshadripuram Educational Trust and all the principals of our sister institutions, other heads of the institutions, conveners, volunteers, and all the participants who have registered across the globe. I welcome Dhareppa Konnur, Program Coordinator, and Sunil Kumar G, Coordinator IQAC. And finally, I welcome our teaching and administrative faculties to this webinar. Thank you, one and all. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you, Sanjana, for welcoming all. May I now request theme speaker Dr. Barbara Bordalejo, textual critic, editor, and digital humanist, University of Saskatchewan, Canada, to enlighten us on the topic of decoding text, digital philology, and digital editions. Over to you, madam.
First of all, well, thank you very much for inviting me to be here today. I will be talking about something that is very close to my interest and is the first thing that made me interested in digital humanities, that is how to decode texts and manuscripts and make them, recode them to make them digital editions. So the first thing that I would like to do is to show you a couple of editions that I have worked on, simply so you can see the kind of work that can be done by using these tools. And we released the Kant app General Prologue last year. It's an app for mobile devices. You can use it on your phone or tablet, and it's freely available. You can go to Google Play if you have an Android device, or to the Apple Store if you have an iPhone, and just simply look for Chaucer General Prologue, and you can download it for free and have it with you on your phone. But I will give you a little demo that is online that shows what the app can do. So this is how it looks like. And basically we have the manuscript and a transcription or an edition of the text plus a translation. And it has some audio too. So if you click, you will.
Here beginneth the book of the Tallis of Canterbury. One that Avril, with his sure sorter, the drocht of March hath pierced to the rota, and bathed every vine in sweet liquor, of which fair too engendered is the flour.
I will not bore you with the whole of the general prologue. Just simply want to demonstrate how it works and how you can follow the text in the manuscript as it is read to you by an actor. You can also shift it to have the edition that is a reader's edition. Is designed for beginner students of the Canterbury Tales. So it has a gloss to explain some words that might not be as clear. It has annotations with historical notes, and it also has a modern English translation. So this is simply to show you the kind of work that we can do. And I also work on an edition of Darwin that again is something that I was very interested in doing. And simply so you can see how it works, you have in a normal page, you can compare any of the two printed editions. And what it does is it shows you at side when the changes were introduced, and you can click on any of them and see all the variants for that particular space. And this is happening live as I am looking at the edition online, that again is freely available. I can just roll over any of the sections and show you the variation. That is simply, as I said, as a little demonstration of how we can work. And this is what we originally worked with. Most of my work is Middle English manuscripts, and this is what I look at almost every day. And when I look at this, what I have to wonder is, what is it that I am going to represent? What is important for me as a researcher, for my readers that will come to this? What do they want to know about this text? What matters to me to say about it? It seems a simple question. It is not. Texts are more complicated that one can imagine, and documents are very, very rarely a straightforward thing. I'll give a very fun example. This is the manuscript in Alice in Wonderland. It seems very easy to read. You have a little illustration by the author. But even just looking at the page number, you will see that there is a little bit of a problem. Is this which page, 8 or 13? And if you think about the illustration, how are you going to represent that? Do you want to say something about the illustration in your encoding? And then when you look at the British Library site, you realize that that page that is 8 or 13, they have marked it as 15. Which one of those numbers will we use to refer to this image to make it sure that other people can come to it eventually? So then we have bits of the text that are written in a very funny manner because the author, Lewis Carroll, wanted to be fun. And maybe how do we want to present this, like in the manuscript or the printed edition? Again, it's only examples, so you can realize the kind of difficulty we find in a printed text. What do we do? How do we write these things? How do we present the different types of typography that we are looking at? Is it important? Is it not? Who cares about these matters? Of course, book historians do, which I like very much and I want to help. So this is something to consider. Look, for example, at the letters here, the different typography used. Are we going to represent that, or the capital letters, or the initial G of Gregory? What are we going to do with these things? What happens when we have more complex texts with equations or formula or different illustrations that are designed for scientific purposes? How to say these things? Does it matter, and who cares about it? So one of the things that I have come to in my career to come to realize is that text and documents are very different things. So a document holds a text, but is not always the same. This is what we have here is an annotated version of a poem by Whitman, and with indications for deleting things. But the things have not yet been deleted. It's just indicated by the author. I want to get rid of this. I want to add this. I want to include other things. So those things matter, for example, to people who are working on textual genetics, anyone that has authorial manuscripts. This is a Joyce manuscript, same thing. What are we going to do with all the annotations? The X, the blue X, for example, means that he has already transcribed in a clean manner for his more final version. But the other signs indicate different types of additions and deletions and inclusions. So you can see that there are many, many changes in this text. So what we have is that these texts seem sometimes straightforward, but they are really instructions, right, to read something. The text itself is a series of little pointers for me as a reader to know what it is. And this is the Declaration of Independence. You can see here that very, very famous passage. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. And it's very clean, very nice. This is the draft for it. It was not so apparently easy to compose. And one of the things that you'll notice is that this is the same passage. We hold these truths, and self-evident has been included on top of a cancellation, which is peculiar. So this is the transcription. Initially it said sacred and undeniable, and later that was changed to self-evident. This is one way of representing that, but it wouldn't be very good to produce a digital edition of the text, because for that we will need to encode all this. But this kind of, I understand this as a good representation of what is happening. Here's one of my favorite variants that will show you one of the things that is more important in the system that we have devised. Here is the word citizens in the second page of the Declaration of Independence, and it's written on top of something else. here is a very close up of it. And when this was subject to multispectral imaging, this is a relatively recent thing, it's 2009 research. It was discovered that underneath the word citizens, it said subjects. So one of the most important documents for the United States that actually is to show their independence initially said subjects. They were so used to being subjects to the queen that they didn't think of anything else until they put the correction. And I find that a very important thing textually. This is the kind of information that I want to have. And also a fantastic example of what can be discovered by using multispectral images on manuscript texts. This is an enhanced image produced by Fernella France, that is the person who discovered this. And it's a fantastic example, I think. Here is her with the discovery. It's a fantastic example of how texts have many layers within, a document can have many layers of text within itself. And that's something that I have been working on for a while, and I have come up with this theoretical distinction. So I have said that this is what the phrase of the text of the document refers to: the complete sequence of marks present in that document, independently of whether these represent a complete, meaningful text in itself. I will try to clarify this before I finish this talk, I promise. Then the various states of the text come from our understanding of how to interpret these marks. So what I said about this is the reader understands the marks present in the text of the document as meaningful and constructs one or more specific sense from them. Where more than one sense can be constructed from the text of the document, I refer to this as the variant states of the text, or as constructed text. Now, this process of construction happens in my mind. I see a text that I understand in a language that I can read, and I construct its meaning. So we want to make editions, editions that look like this, that have images, that have different ways of access parts of it, that have a complete text. But we also want to understand what the difference is between, for example, what I understand to be the initial text that a scribe writes or an author writes, and what are the subsequent states of revision. I also want to emphasize things like capital letters, that in this particular manuscript is represented by, in our edition, with a gold large letter A. It's not exactly, of course, as in the manuscript, but it tries to represent that in case the images were not to be available. So why do we encode these things? Well, we want to make the text readable. We want to make that handwriting that not always is easy to read, although I have shown some very, very neat handwriting today. We want to standardize sometimes the spelling and the punctuation so people can understand more readily this text. We want to make them searchable. We want someone to come and say, I need to see all the instances of this phrase or this word or something. We want them to be exchangeable. I want to produce a transcription that can be used by many different systems for all kinds of research, not just for making editions. We want to highlight different parts of the text. So I could encode, for example, all the place names, king's names, something, dates that are of interest to me, things like that. We want to compare texts with each other. So for that, we need a system that will allow us to produce that comparison. And we want to present various texts that are contained in a single document. And of course, for us, we want to produce editions. We use XML, that is TI compliant, and this is something very, very well known. XML separates the content from the form, so I can encode things and then present them as I want. It is extensible. It can be modified to accommodate new situations that might arise. It has to be well-formed, and it must be valid. And well-formed and valid are two technical terms that have to do with whether XML is complete and whether it fits my document type definition. So again, this is the Henger manuscript of the Canterbury Tales in one of our editions. And what I see here is different ink colors. The rats have been eating the corner of the text, and there is a stain that obscures part of the text, but someone has overwritten after a while. So all of those things need to be somehow represented, depending on the type of edition one is doing. And here is how we have encoded that. It's a very simple encoding, just showing the body of the text. We link the image and we divide the parts of the tales in the general prologue in this case. That is a group, we say. Then we have then the first line, that is the title. We call it an initial rubric. We specify that it's in English, and they have each line of the Canterbury Tales. And what you will see also is that we have abbreviation marks and their expansions. So I'm containing already more than one text in my transcription. The text that includes the abbreviations that I will be using, for example, in a scholarly edition, mostly, and the expanded text, the expanded abbreviation that I might use most likely for a reader's edition. How do we represent then the textual changes that I was talking about? This is an example from Jane Austen, and Jane Austen wrote in pencil, and then when she was fixing the text, she would write again on top of her pencil in ink. That would fix it, right? And in this particular section of the manuscript, we have an authorial change. So originally she wrote, "Now if we could but get a young heiress," and then she wrote on top of it, "Now if we could get," deleted or stroke the previous "get," and then continued, "a young heiress." So this is the comparison. It's not that she stroke just the "get" and left the "but." No, she superimposed the second word on top of the first one for some reason. And this needs to be represented, I think. Not everybody will necessarily agree with this, but I feel that it's important to represent exactly what happened. And so I come up with this system to represent it. And what I do is I use a compliant tag, that is the apparatus tag, and I separate the different levels of this. So what I'm saying is that there is a replacement, that a word that was in pencil, written in pencil, the word "but," was then overwritten by ink and in the word "get." And this is a very, as you can see, very punctilious, very detailed type of work. But it's exactly the type of work that I, as an editor and a textual critic, am interested in. To me, it's important not to just say, "Oh, well, she erased a word." Well, first, she didn't erase anything. She just strokes a word. She gave me that indication as a reader that this is not a word that I should read. But actually, then she put the same word on top of another one. And I want to be able to say that. If you look at the above section, when I have a readings, separate reading type equals orig, I would say that the original reading in that section of the text was "but get." And that the final reading, which is this, is "get." Those are very interpretive. They are my editorial judgment comes into play and says, well, this is what I interpret happened here. Of course, I could be wrong. I don't think I am in this case, but I could be wrong. And someone else might disagree. So when I do this lit section, what I'm trying to achieve is to provide the readers with enough information of how I am interpreting it the way that I am. This is the evidence that I have. So I give in this final tag here, the reading type equals lit. I am offering my interpretation of facts, but trying to be as factual as possible. I hope that that's clear, but I suppose that you can ask me questions later. So to me, it's a really important thing to do. Now, imagine I could also correctly encode as I have here and say, well, the original reading was now if we could but get, and the final reading is now if we could get, and this is how it happened. But to me, that shouldn't be done like that, because these words, now if we could, are not affected by the change at all. Nothing has happened to them. They were just written and then overwritten in the normal manner. So I don't want them to be part of the, let's say, place of variation that constructs a new text. And I don't know if this makes clear what I was saying before about having a multiple layers of text. Because what I can do with either of this, of course, but I think mine on the left is more precise. What I can do is I can call my edition, my digital edition, say, please show me the text that was originally written in pencil, or please show me the latest text that was written in ink, or show me what the process of that change is. So that is at least 3 different texts, but it's all embedded in the same transcription. So that to me is the purpose of my work, to try to put forward this type of change and this variation in single spaces. I hope that that other people would agree with that. Some have various projects use this system for encoding the text. So mostly projects that I have been involved with, like the medieval Spanish cancioneros or the Historia de España, also the Italian projects, the Boccaccios, Teseira. But also now the people editing the Greek New Testament are considering implementing the complete set of tags for this particular representation of the text. I'm going to skip over some of the coming slides, so to reach my conclusion, because I feel that I might be running out of time. So what have we learned from doing all these things? So we have to make sure when we are starting an edition that we emphasize our own research. The reason why I'm saying that is because it is very easy to try to encode text and make editions that will serve many, many different purposes. But if one does that, one runs the risk of, simply being too overwhelmed to produce something that is precise or that responds to one's own research needs. Why that is important? Because we are also researchers and we want to be able to present conclusions and ideas, or pursue particular lines of research. So we need to concentrate first and foremost in what is it that we need for our own research. And then if that serves other people's purposes, that's wonderful. But it shouldn't be our aim to try to please everybody or help everybody. That is just simply too wide a name. Eventually, of course, because these are our transcriptions are digital, we can release them, and we do release them, and they are fully open. So someone else can do other type of research, linguistic research, or I don't know, grammatical, morphological, anything else that is not my particular interest, but someone else might want to do. So for editions, we need to decide exactly what kind of edition we want to do. And at the moment, we only do edited text for readers, or edited text for scholars. We don't have any other intermediates, where our editions are mostly for research. So that's our focus, because that's what interests us. We need to allocate resources wisely, and time and effort are resources. So even though people want to volunteer sometimes for doing this work. Even that volunteer work needs to be directed towards very specific aims so as to not waste it. I always find that particularly when people volunteer to work for the Canterbury Tales Project, to me is a great chance, a great honor, and I don't want that effort to ever go to waste. So I really want to make sure that people can make a meaningful contribution to the project. And I always say, well, one should choose software which with much care. When we produced the CanTap that was released no, more than a year ago. It's late February. We released it in early February last year. We produced that using PhoneGap. At the time, it was fine technology. And one of the things that we could do was to encode everything in HTML and then convert it using PhoneGap, which is what you saw initially, the what I showed you online and what you would download if you downloaded the CanTap. That is no longer usable because the way that the mobile phones are moving, the technology for mobile phones is developing, has closed each system. So now Apple has a proprietary system for producing apps as well as Android. That means that we need more specialized people to do that. It's not just my work as a scholar. I'm not an app developer. That is not my job. And now the software requires you to be an app developer to do that. So we have to hire one. We cannot, well, I don't want to do it myself. And I couldn't do it myself. That's the truth. I couldn't do that myself with the current software. So it is important then to choose software that you can use that will be reusable in the future and that will permit you create the things that you need to. People ask me, can we produce something similar to the CanTap? And my answer to that is generally not with the same technologies and not without help, because it has changed in the last year already so much that we cannot do it as easily as before. So these are my closing remarks. I think I really am very grateful to be here today. Thank you so much for your attention, and please ask me any questions when you're allowed to ask questions. Thank you.
May I now request one more theme speaker, Dr. Spandana Bhowmik, Archivist and Digital Humanist, Indian Foundation for the Arts, Bengaluru, India, to enlighten us on the topic of drawing a Bengali landscape in DH, processing and presenting Rabindranath Tagore's work using Pattarpan.
Thank you for inviting me here. And it's a great pleasure to be able to share the screen space with Dr. Bordalejo here. What I want to talk about is, in a way, a continuation of what Dr. Bordalejo presented. We can treat this as a specific case, maybe, especially in the Indian language context. I would be talking about developing softwares and tools for textual computing and online critical editions that I have been involved with, and the complexities and challenges that we try to find answers for. We all know about critical editions, and in a way, Dr. Bordalejo was speaking about how we look at texts while we edit them for scholars and readers. The critical editions are essential to understand a title in its multiplicity, for me at least. It tries to look at the text as a process and maps the life of the work through different versions. There are various ways one looks at a text when creating a critical edition, though. Some would prefer to choose one particular version as more complete or interesting or authentic, as if a better representation of the text than the others, based on various different reasons. Sometimes the first instance is most important, sometimes the last author-vetted edition would be considered as the final authoritative text, and we simply want to know how it was molded to that form. But some would say that each version of a work is equally important, representing a particular state of the text at a particular time. Exactly like a photo taken of a person at different ages and in different phases of their life represents them at that particular moment. The person, but, is an assimilation of all those images. The example is perhaps an oversimplification, but may be useful to understand what I am trying to explain. Collation, or comparing the texts from each version with the others, is what gives us an idea about where the texts have changed and how much. Once we have all these data, there are various ways to make sense of the data, interpret them, and use them in your analysis of the work. In its basic, collation is actually quite easy to understand. We all have seen Word files with track changes feature on, where it marks the changes made in the document while editing. In a way, their Word itself is comparing the previous edition of the previous version of the text file with the latest one. What we consider as text, by the way, is actually a string of characters to a computer. And since computer only understands zeros and ones, it translates that string into exactly that and remembers the sequence of it. So when we are asking it to compare two strings, it sounds easy, right? But it gets complicated when these strings of characters are long, like really long. Imagine multiple files with 100,000 words each. And sections could be in different positions in different versions. In case of such place changes within a chapter or through various chapters, it is not enough to mark only the differences, but the matches too. There could be innumerable numbers of misleading partial matches. A change in a spelling, a change of voice can introduce differences in a sentence, reducing the percentage of match. All these become immensely complex when one tries to collate between more than two versions and represent the result in a human readable way. This, hence, has been a focus of a niche group of scholars, Dr. Bordalejo being one of them, since the beginning of DH, to create tools for collating texts successfully and representing the results in a way so that the textual scholars and editors can use the resultant data in their research. For today's session, I would like to talk about how a small team of people, including me, tried to find out if there could be a collation tool for processing Indian slash non-Latin texts and how it developed into a possible collaborative platform to create a multimedia critical edition for texts, more specifically, plays in the end. So let me go back to the beginning of it. In 2004, I was a student of film studies in Jadavpur University when, in a corner room at the end of the department, some activities started. It was strange. Sometimes you could hear old records of Indian classical music playing, and there would be photocopies of advertisements, 100-year-old advertisements, stuck in the notice board outside. We came to know that this place is called the School of Cultural Texts and Records, and it's an archive and a research center, mostly, probably one of the first in India to be on digital humanities. In 2005, I appeared for an interview for one of the projects and got selected. I still do not know why. I was a chemistry graduate and a film studies master's. Had very little experience in literature or literary criticism. But jokes apart, the project which I got selected for was the first of its kind on textual computing in Bengali under the supervision of Professor Shukanta Chaudhary. The school got hold of a Bengali collation software, Tophat, a difference in English, possibly the first ever to work on any Indian language. We wanted to create machine-readable transcription of different versions of a Bengali play, Visarjan, The Sacrifice, by Rabindranath Tagore, and experiment on collating the texts using the software. The problem of collation that I was talking about actually increases manyfold when we are working with a non-Latin font. Bengali too has vowels and consonants, but unlike English, the vowels create a conjunct glyph with the consonant when used together. This is true for many Indian languages. two or three consonants can occur together without any separating vowel to create a conjoined glyph too. All of these were problems for a machine to process, and it took us a long time to come to terms with these even after Unicode was introduced. On another level, we chose Tagore to work with as his creations are the most interesting when it comes to textual complexities. Almost all the titles Tagore wrote have a history of complex revisions. There are several instances of working on a title both before and after publication, even going back to it after several editions, re-revising a text each time it is performed, and so on. For example, let us take the cluster of texts that I worked with for my doctoral thesis. Influenced by a story from Jataka, the Buddhist religious literature, Tagore wrote a play, Raja, the King of the Dark Chamber in English. It evolved through three different titles, two different forms, and 23 versions, excluding the English translations, which Tagore only edited, sort of supervised. Over almost 30 years, from 1911 till 1939, Tagore went back to this play again and again. The genesis and transformation of these texts, the textual transmission, would be most interesting to any textual scholar. These texts had undergone from minor to radical changes through layers of addition, deletion, and relocation of words, dialogues, characters, and sometimes whole scenes. It has changed from a play to a dance drama. It became a challenge, a very interesting one though, to plot and map the changes so varied and find out the stories behind the cause and effect, sort of, if you are into genetic criticism. But it became a harder challenge if you want a computer to understand these shifts in the text and represent them to human eye in a simple way. How could a software understand the kind of complications and still recognize similarities? On the other hand, who can if not a computer? So many changes and so many different levels would take months to analyze for a human being, whereas a couple of hours would probably be enough for a computer. If only the system can be made efficient enough to identify and process the changes properly. The work with Roman alphabets progressed a lot over the years, and they do have tools now to help this kind of text processing, some of which we just saw. Dictionaries and lexicons are available. More work is going on in the field of semantics. No such help was there when we started working with Bengali texts. We were back to basics, so to say, strings and their positions. So the first software we worked with was called Tafat, as I said. It was a very basic software that we realized later. Like I said, it's comparing strings. It could work with three different texts. Output was in plain text or in HTML, but it had a problem to deal with. First of all, it couldn't deal with more than two texts, and then it couldn't process text if they are too long and too complicated. There are lots of transposition of sections from one to another, place changes, like I say. So we realized that it's a very basic tool and we need to create something better. We began developing a more flexible program. We called it Pathantar, which was a Java-based platform. It literally meant textual variants. Needless to say that there were a couple of years in between. Development of the software itself took time. It was difficult for a programmer to understand the concept. It also needed someone who would enjoy the challenge, have fun analyzing the weird ways language work, and find a working logic to translate that to a computer. My part in this was to make sense of the ways text could change and translate that to the programmer and see if he could create a logic. And the trials were actually fun. We used Pathantar to complete the Visurgent project that I was talking about. There were 8 versions of the play, and the size varied from 4,000 words to 19,000 words. And to avoid problems in results, we manually created a table of comparable text sections in different versions. This was a long and tiring process. Making this kind of a table for each title of Tagore's huge volume of work would have been impossible. And this was the time when our professors were making plans for Bichitra, the online Tagore Varyuram project, complete with manuscripts and printed book images, transcriptions, and collations of almost all of Tagore's work, in Bengali as well as in English. So we started thinking about two types of collation, maybe a software to create that manual table that we did for Visarjan, which we started calling gross collation, as well as compare the text at a finer character level, fine collation as we called it. There was experimental software that Arunashish Acharya, an instructor in the School of Education Technology, JU, created, but it needed someone to develop it further. So we got another guy in our team, Neil Shunando Boshu, who's a programmer and an ethical hacker. And then there were months of trial and error, testing and suggestions, explaining the complications and finding out solutions to deal with them logically. As a result, what we got is Probhed. Probhed is basically a package of two different softwares. The two parts are gross collation and fine collation, as I mentioned earlier. The gross collation compares chapters and paragraphs. For plays, the divisions change into act or scene and speech. For long poems, canto and stanza. We call them section and segments in general. So it compares different versions of text and finds out gross structural changes. It also gives an idea about the similarity of two such chapters on a percentage scale. If supplied with a certain cutoff value, it shows the chapter and paragraphs having match percentage higher than that as a comparable or similar set. The fine collation then takes the result produced by the gross collation set and collects the sets further to produce detailed result where the differences between the versions are found out and marked down to the character level. It highlights the words and characters that are replaced, deleted, or added in any of the versions. So basically, it's a software that matches text and shows the results in three different levels: chapter, paragraph, and words. We used this for Bichitra. So I keep talking about Bichitra. Let me show a little bit of Bichitra. I have a few screenshots. I don't want to go online because it's a huge thing. It began in November 2010 as part of the 150th birth anniversary celebration of Tagore, ended in March 2013, and you can access it from the website link that I've given here. This is a home page. It actually has almost all works of Tagore, like I said, including all possible versions that we could collect, the manuscripts, the printed editions, and if there are more than one editions with definitive changes, then all those editions. It has a hyperbibliography which gives you all the different kinds of material for a title. So the manuscripts, transcriptions, and collation results. There's a manuscript viewer with transcription like this. And there's a search engine and hyperconcordance, which can run on the standard version of each of these texts and give you the number of occurrences of a word or a cluster of words with context. These are all working on Bengali texts. And this particular search engine was developed by two undergraduate students of computer science in the university. Final and most important part of Vichitra was the collation results that we had. As you can see, this is a section level result of one of the novels by Tagore. And each strip is actually a version of the text. For this particular novel, there were no manuscript available. So these are the 1314, 1315, 1316, and 1347. These are the four print versions that we got. And you can see the smaller blocks within a strip are the chapters of the novel. And if you bring your mouse over one of them, you can see in this version, that chapter actually was split into two. And here you can see the base you have selected. and the percentage of match it has in the other two versions. Let me just make it full screen, maybe it will be a better, yeah. So the first part was 54% and the second part was 70%. And if you click on one of these matches that this has found, it shows on the right hand side the different paragraphs, how they match with the other version of the same novel. This is a segment level, so this is where we are going in inside that section sort of. And if you click on the base here in the previous page, you will go here, and in a similar pattern, you see the paragraphs in the chapter and how they match to the different paragraphs of the other chapters, and the percentages also. This gives you an option to read the transcriptions also side by side, which I will show you later in a different when I go online. So this is actually the third level result, which we were calling fine collation. You have the base on your left hand side and the collation result on the right. There are three different variations that have been collated together. The base is the first one, and the base is one and three different, and you can see that this, when you click on this word, there are variation in spelling in the other three versions. You can select any one of them from here, and the text of that particular edition will be shown in the reference pane. So this was the Chitra. Now, this is basically a place which provides tools to the researchers for their analysis of the texts. What else one can do with this? There, that is what was in my mind when I started working on my PhD project in 2008, sorry. So at that time, we were still in the Pathantar phase, the second software in this three software series. I chose a cluster of text by Tagore, like I said earlier, three titles with several manuscripts, press proofs, stage copies, and printed editions. My aim was to study their genesis and transformation through the course of 30 years and create a multimedia digital archive to show all primary resources, including text, images, audio, video, and other reference material, such as articles, reports on the text or the performance, photographs, memoirs. There are lots of memoirs available because Tagore was surrounded by scholars and authors. So many of them have written memoirs regarding the time they spent with Tagore. I was supposed to use the collation engine that the school was developing. Frankly speaking, something like Proved or Vichitra was not in the near future then. So my idea was to create a presentation using perhaps Adobe Director or something like that. My work continued parallel to my responsibilities at school, which was primarily work on the collation software development. My experience in dealing with Tagore's textual complications fed into the logic of softwares after hour-long discussions and debates with the team, which was by then Arunashish, Shunando, myself, and we were all under supervision of Professor Chaudhary, Shukanta Chaudhary. Each problem I could foresee had to be explained logically and with specific examples, as the two computer scientists were looking at it more technically than textually. But this led to the most detailed collation software in Bengali, which actually could work on with any script in Unicode. It became a huge advantage, but also a restriction. It generated complicated HTML pages like you can see here. As a result, my basic medium had to shift to HTML and web automatically, and I had to compromise with style and structure. On the plus side, what was conceived as a multimedia presentation took shape into a collaborative editing platform, perhaps. Let me show you what I did for my PhD. So this is all in Bengali because that was like the foremost challenge we had. This is the homepage of the platform that I created. I call it Path Darpan, which is basically in English, a broad translation would be textual mirror of sort. So it mirrors everything that a text can have. So this is the first page, the home page, which explains what this platform is about and how it works. But I would actually like to take you. This is what I called a text graph. This is a page where I try to plot the way the texts had influenced each other. See, on the left, this is a timeline. It starts from 1910 when the manuscript was written, first manuscript was written. By the way, that was also debated, and it's my opinion that that's the first manuscript. And then you go down, this is the first title, and you are going down on the timeline and see it ends around 1921, while the second title comes up in 1920, which was surprisingly influenced by the first edition that was out in 1911, not the next edition that was out in 1916. As you can see, this again, the second title is going down this way. Before the second edition, you see the influence is from the first title, first edition again. And it's very interesting to see there were press copies and stage copies of the second edition because it was edited for a performance. And then in 1931, you see these two were plays. This suddenly changes into a dance drama. Look at the kind of changes and influences here. It's completely crazy, I would say. It includes a manuscript, second manuscript, press copy thing here. There are two stage copies here, another manuscript here, reprint here, and then it became part of a book, then again another manuscript, and it goes on like that. You see, it was crazy, but it was so invigorating to work with something like this complicated. And here you see all these symbols beside each of these texts, they have a meaning. If you look at this is the first manuscript, and if you click on this, it gives you a brief introduction of what this text is. And then if you click on this, the next one, the icon here, it gives you a transcription of the text, plain text transcription. Then there is something that I call actual Patho Darpun, the text thumbnail sort of, which will take you to this page, which now looks like the Vichitra result page, but there are some things that are additional here. See, when you click on one of these blocks, again, these are different versions of the two titles that I was talking about, the two plays. And if you click on one, it shows you how it matches with the other versions. But see, there are two small tabs with each of these texts. You can actually open the manuscript image here and also read a transcription side by side. Mouse over the text, you can see the kind of corrections. This manuscript actually had two types of correction. First of all, it underwent, I think, at least 5 levels of corrections, and some of them were in pencils and some of them were in pen. I discovered later that the second edition, when it went out in 1916, those were the corrections marked in pen. So it was very interesting to read and work on this. Now see, in the transcription, you can actually put notes, and they can be anything. You can talk about your editorial notes, they can be textual notes, they can be transcription dependent notes, and there are, you can watch, you can find manuscripts side by side if you want. You can see the transcription side by side also if you need, and you can open them up as long as your screen is not full. So this was the text collation part. I will actually take you to the other section of it, which is dance drama. So see, in my opinion, the first two plays were more close to each other and they were heavily influenced by each other. So I compared them together. But the dance drama that I was talking about was not directly comparable, so to say, with regard to the text that it had. So I thought I would work on that separately, and I created a separate collation result and a text mirror page for that. You see here, if I go into one of these blocks, again, all these things are coming, like I said, you get the images of the manuscript and the text, and you can open them side by side, but there is something more here. Since this was a dance drama, there are audio recordings and video performances of the thing. In this platform, you can actually add them to the sections that correspond to them. So now what you can do is you can open the manuscript here, you can open the transcription here if you want, and of course this has a note which also has an image, which was a recording, a photograph taken from a performance in Sri Lanka in 1934, and you can see Tagore sitting here on stage. He was too old then, but he was on stage. He traveled with the team, and you read your transcription, you go over the manuscript, you check different versions, and you also see the performance and you connect to them, especially if you are a director, if you are going over your texts and you are trying to figure out how this can be represented on stage, or how people have represented them on stage. You have an option to have all these data, all these details together on one screen. So if along with this, so this, like I said, this actually at the end became something like a collaborative editing platform. And why I'm saying that, you see, this is from this page, there is a connection, there is a link to go to the text editor, the notes editor here. If you go there, it gives you an option to add notes to any of the sections that you want to. And let's say I want to put a note here on this particular paragraph, and I click on create. It gives me option to type and add image, add link, hyperlink, and whatnot. So the thing is, if I want to do something and I have a team of people that would like to work on a text, here there are already some notes, and you can see these are smaller editorial and transcription and notes in some. This is editorial. I have a team of people and we would like to work on a cluster of text or a single text maybe, where we would like to work collaboratively. This platform right now, it doesn't have a user account facility, but if that could be added, I couldn't do it, it was too much for me. If that could be added, people can log in from anywhere and work collaboratively on this. So at the end, I actually thought of this as a tool to draw a landscape around a work in any language, but especially in non-Latin ones, to place it within all its multiplicity, context, references, to give one a broader impression of the text and its life. See, you can also add images, you can also add a reference library here, and I would have shown those if there are more time. I just want to add one personal comment here. All the 23 versions that this Pashadarpan has were manually transcribed by me, and by the time Prabhed, the collation software was ready, I already compared all of them manually. I had the advantage of interpreting the manuscripts based on my research, and I compared two titles together, like I said. Finally, for the sake of the site, when I collated them through Prabhed, the section page gave exactly the same result that I predicted manually. And the joy of it, only someone who has worked with developing a tool like this would understand, like after working for 1.5 years, 2 years on developing something, and when it works actually, what kind of a joy it can be. And I would like to end my presentation with that. the joy of making something, the joy of understanding texts and representing them in all its vibrant, colorful tones, I would say. Thank you very much.
My first question to Barbara ma'am. Shall I go through with the question, ma'am? How the modern technology has helped you in decoding the text?
First, we have very, very, very good imaging now that allows us to see things that we couldn't see before. And we can use, for example, that images, the images that I showed of the variants in the Declaration of Independence. Those were produced using something called multispectral imaging that requires many different photography pieces of photos in different colors of the spectrum. So that allows you to see things that you couldn't see just by looking at the document. We also have experimented, although we have not been super successful with that, but there is, you can use for very, very high resolution images when you have a correction that is unclear what was there before. You can use things like a coloring using Photoshop, even very, very simple things. So there is a project in Oxford that has used this particularly for uncovering palimpsests. So texts that have been erased virtually. And they work on music manuscripts. So there is quite a bit to be said of what you can see by not just looking with the naked eye, ultraviolet, infrared imaging, all of those things, when you're allowed to do that with a manuscript, because it's not always possible, but when it's possible, it really can help to understand. I have some examples of that, but there was not that much time, but yeah, some of my colleagues have produced very interesting work using ultraviolet, for example. Yeah.
The next question to Sahana ma'am. The question is that, ma'am, where do you place Indian DH in a global DH, ma'am?
That's really a very broad question, and I have worked with only a very small portion of the digital humanities. But I would say that the trend that I am seeing for the last few years, it is at par with the global digital humanities trends in India specifically, and people are more focused on, like, the people who work with texts, people like me or Dr. Bordalejo here, we are not so focused on what is happening right now at present, right? We look at texts and we kind of drown ourselves in that. But there are people who are working with the day-to-day issues, the policies that government makes, the activism that is around us, the kind of violence that goes on. So there are lots of works that are happening in DH in Indian scenario, but it takes a really long time to actually talk about and figure out how you would place it on the broader perspective of what is happening around the world.
In India, we have so many old manuscripts on families. What are the ways to digitalize them, madam? Would you please throw light on these things? We have
Uh,
every manuscript in a family.
yeah, I know. Well, it's that requires a special care, and that is not my specialty. I'm not a librarian, so I'm certainly not a rare book librarian. What I have heard, and I do have colleagues that work, for example, in the Mahabharata, what I heard is that it's very difficult to access some of these manuscripts because they are in either in remote places or in libraries that do not have a lot of resources. So one way would be, I would say, to seek to do a national project of digitization, uh, trying to involve the government in it. We attempted that, for example, for the United Kingdom. It never happened. But I know that in Switzerland they have done it, in the Czech Republic, that they have very few resources, they have managed to do it. So it is possible. Of course, India is a very, very large country with so many differences, even from one region to another, that I wouldn't dare to say, well, this is how to do it. I just say, well, my indication would be to try to get together a group of people who are interested in manuscripts. And maybe I would link with the IIIF, that is the International Image Interoperability Framework. They are very interested in having exchangeable images, having images that everybody can use in other contexts. So that would be my suggestion, to ask the experts and build a national panel. It has to be a local initiative. One of the things that I wanted to say before, I was in India. I was lucky to be invited in 2019, and one of the things that I discovered, Spandana was saying the same thing, is that there is so much work going on digital activism. For example, the investigations around Twitter, and I have noticed, I work in a Global Outlook Digital Humanities that focuses on non-global North countries. I'm originally from South America, and what I have noticed in the last year or so is an increase in the number of scholars that are coming from India joining the group. And this is a free thing. It's just a listserv where we just exchange ideas, discuss new things. But I have found that fascinating. Particularly, people are linking at that level of Twitter activism and political change. This is something that is very, very important, I think, and admire why I'm very, very interested in political activism everywhere, of course. But yeah, I have noticed this thing. So that would be my advice: is a local national panel that links with other experts to carry out a national initiative.
Thank you very much, respected speakers, for answering the questions of the participants. A small announcement before presidential remarks. We send the feedback form link now in the chat box, as well as to your registered email, which will be active for next 48 hours. Kindly fill the same and send back for e-certificate. The e-certificates will reach you from 7 to 10 days. May I now request Sir W.D. Ashok, Honorary Trustee, Seshadripuram Educational Trust, to render presidential remarks. Over to you, sir.
Good evening, everyone. From the Seshadripuram Evening Degree College, I thank the main key speakers who have actually done a very good suggestions and to the subject decoding text, digital philosophy and digital editions taken by Dr. Barbara. It is wonderful that a lot of new things have come up in this event. And from this Seshadripuram Education Trust, this Seshadripuram Evening Degree College, doing its 5th session of Digital Humanities, has shown that it is some things can be learned in many ways. At the same time, coming back to the Digital Humanities, this is the sort of project using computers to create new avenues for teaching and research in the humanities. Digital technology promises to remove many barriers and inequalities in the search for knowledge. Madam, this whatever the talk has been given, the text technologies combines the histories of books and digital humanities to investigate the long history of text from the earliest period of human communication to the present day. This is what she was able to communicate, that there are many manuscripts and there are many script changes which are happening in the ages and according to the different printing methods which was going on in the earlier days, how the books were being made up, what were the different types of papers which was being used in those days, and how the visual appearance or the typing fonts which were being used in those days, how it can be resolved in different ways. Both the speakers, Dr. Spandana and Dr. Barbara, have given their opinions, and Dr. Barbara has even said that the applications for the general prologue Kant app can be used for English translations using multiple spectrum analysis, giving that how the readings can be made from the old documents that is layers of text can be easily removed by the images with better resolutions using multiple spectrum analysis. And this is wonderful that it helps out to our contest also. That is, as Principal Satish of Evening Degree College was just telling, many of the manuscripts in our Indian nature also is available, but it has to be read in a very conclusive way, because we have to just go in for modernization and digitalization of our own languages like Kannada, Hindi, or Sanskrit, which has to take a change and it has to be digitalized at the same time. Dr. Spandana giving more reference to the papers of Ravindranath Tagore and his additions of different ways and how different aspects has to be noted, that everything cannot be taken at one instance. Plays are sometimes given a dramatic or a dance drama appearance, which cannot be made out so easily. So softwares are a limitations in many times, but still Dr. Spandana has given the different applications or softwares, that is Tafat one, which can handle Bengali, Devagiri, and Roman languages, which can be studied in different manuscripts, which can adapt to the software. At the same time, fine collations also can be cleared by Vichitra software, which is giving a practicality applications. She has shown it on the website also. So at the ultimate, she has said that all the work which has been taken up in this type of occasions, when the texts are available or manuscripts are available, you will have to just think that it is the joy of success when you create something which is very well to be preserved in this time. So I would like to thank the Evening Degree College, the coordinator and staff who have come out with this topic and who have done a wonderful job. I would like to thank Dhareppa Konnur, Principal Satish sir, and Coordinator Sunil Kumar, who have conducted in such a beautiful manner. And thanks to all the participants and students. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Baba, ma'am. Thank you for joining with us. Thank you. Spandana, madam, thank you very much, ma'am.